Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to go through a talk about the new Steam library and events tools. This should be interesting for any developers that are thinking about how to get the most out of their release on Steam and how to communicate with players about updates and events and activities happening in your game. So let's get right to it. Today we're going to talk about getting the most out of your game updates and events and announcements. I'm going to start by talking about some of the goals for why we've built these features and how they work together. The Steam library and the new events system is designed to work together to help you as a developer re-engage your existing players and be able to create appealing reasons for new players to care about your game. So I'll talk in a little bit more detail about what those mean as we go through this talk. And I'm also going to go into deep dive on some particular case studies, but also talk about where these events and things show up throughout Steam, how they work, what the tools look like for authoring and creating and managing them. Throughout this talk, I'm going to use the word event a lot. And what I mean when I use the word event is going to mean actually any number of different kinds of things. When I say the word event, I'm going to mean a major update or an announcement or a tournament or live stream or some in-game loot drop special timed weekend. Any number of these things that you might have happening in your game that give players a reason, excuse to get excited about jumping in, playing that game, learning about the game, hearing what's going on. I'm just going to roll together and use the word event to mean those things. Otherwise, it would take me forever to go through each and every form of that as I go through this talk. So not all of these different kinds of events or activities apply to every game. Your game might have some of these activities and events and announcements happening in them. Other games would have a totally different set. So as I'm going through this, just keep in mind whichever ones make sense and apply to your game. You can think about how it might apply to the game you're working on now or maybe a game that you're going to make in the future. The Steam events system is really designed so that you as a developer can author one of these events in one single place and then have that automatically pushed out to a variety of different places across Steam. So the big major places for that are the Steam Community Hub, your store page, or the Steam Store in general, and the Steam Library. How your event shows up in each of these places will depend on the kind of event and your player's relationship with your game as well. So I'll go into some more detail about that as I go through this too. So where do events appear? So I'm going to go through kind of page by page and talk about where these events appear and some other things that you as a developer have control over and can customize as you're working on your events and announcements. So the first thing in the Steam library, top row at the very top, these are events and announcements. These show up to players based on the games that they've been playing, the games that are in their library, games that are updating, having interesting things happening. So you as a developer can cause your event to show up at the top of your players' libraries when you post one of these events. Also on that front page of the library, you'll notice there's some new asset styles. The one on the far left for Cat Quest here, that's an existing store capsule. If you have a game up on Steam anytime in the last 10 years, you already have one of these assets. The vertical shaped ones on the right-hand side, we've recently added those with the new library update. So if you haven't gone back and uploaded these assets for past games that you've shipped, we encourage you to do that. Just makes this really nice presentation in players' libraries. Then when I click on a game in the library, this is the library detail page. And there's two big key assets here. There's the hero image and transparent logo. So you as a developer have control over this. The hero image is really designed to be kind of an ambient scene setting image. Shouldn't have any text or things like that. It should be really kind of subtle background. Maybe show your hero like it does here with Astroneer. And then your logo, transparent logo. You can determine how these are positioned and how they scale. We've got a built-in little tool that gives you a preview of how these things work together, how they overlap. They are separate files, so you can position them in a number of different ways. And then secondly, on this page, you have your library spotlight. This is a big banner, basically, that you can put up, and it goes along with your events. And it basically takes over kind of the top part of the player's library detail page to help promote whatever event or activity or announcement you want to make and make sure that you get in front of your players that are on their way to go play your game. Then as we continue on, this is another example of a game detail page. And in the middle here, you can see this is called the activity feed. And you can see mixed in with what my friends are up to, I also am seeing the game updates and patch notes and announcements and events that developer is posting. So that's where, over time, the events that you post will kind of fall into a chronological order in that center column. Along with a lot of other things that are new to the Steam library on this page, which you saw achievements and announcements and trading cards and which friends are playing the game. All of that stuff is centralized, pulled together. It's kind of, for each player, it's their lens, their relationship with this game. So the events and the friends' activity is all going to be based on who they're friends with and which events that they've seen already, things like that. Another place that events show up, this is a store game page. I'm going to zoom in on kind of the lower part of that. There's a section called Recent Updates. This is where 2 of the most recent events for this game are going to show up. This shows 2 of the cover images that represent those events. So you, again, as a developer, you can author and provide these images as you're creating your event. Also, when you use an update visibility round, it's basically a visibility token that you can use. You get 5 of them for each game, basically to reserve for the biggest, most significant updates in your game. When you use one of those, it causes your game to show up on the homepage along with the brief description of what that big update is. So this shows up to people that own your game and people that have your game on your wish list. So it's another way of surfacing your game to people that are clearly interested in it or already own it and playing it. And then lastly, events show up also in your community hub. So when people go to the main community hub for your game, your most recent announcement or event shows up kind of pinned up in the upper left-hand corner. And as you scroll down, the other events show up in the feed there. You can also switch to the news tab, which includes all of your most recent events. Wherever you get to these events, whether that's in the library, store, or community, when you click on them, it opens up this pop-up viewer of that event. And this contains the entire event, so including animated images and all the details. It's got controls for rating, sharing, discussing. You can share to social media or share to your activity feed as a player. And then you can keep scrolling back through the history of events that this game has posted. So as a player, if I haven't played this game in a few months, I can easily scroll through and kind of catch up on what has happened in this game in those months since I last played it. I can watch the YouTube videos right in line. I can read about what those major updates are. I can check out the cool images, the new artwork that's being added, all of that. So kind of a quick synopsis, a quick way to catch up and see what all is new in this game. There's also another view of each event, which is this view detail page. This players get to here if you follow a direct link to an event. So if I use the share option for an event, or if I copy and paste the URL to an event and send that link to you, and you follow that URL, it will take you to this page. Since you're coming from outside and viewing this page, then there's more context that's added. So you'll notice there's a right-hand column here that includes the game capsule, the price, the add to cart button, the wish list button. It's a little bit of metadata about the start time, what kind of event it is. So this makes sure that it has context for players that are coming in and checking out this event so they know what game it is that they're reading about. Should give them all of the context and the call to actions for interacting with that game and that event. That's compared to the previous viewer that I showed you that pops up on top. Mostly you're opening that in the context of already understanding what game you're interacting with. So it doesn't need to have this right-hand column and that additional actions. At the bottom of this detail page, again, then there's the rating buttons, the discussing buttons, share options, and then also 3 little capsules showing your other recent events. So players can, in this way, be able to explore through the recent events that have been happening in this game. Just so kind of a different mode of going back through history and kind of catching up on what has been happening in this game. So now I'm going to go through some of the case studies, some particular kinds of events that you might want to think about and how you might want to use those events. So I'm going to start with patch notes. This is really kind of the most basic instance of an event. This is, you've got some updates to the game. It's mostly about small fixes, bug fixes, small additions, things that mostly you don't need to broadcast to the whole world about your game, but your hardcore fans might want to know what has changed, what you fixed, what you rebalanced or tuned. So patch notes specifically don't show up in a couple of places, so they're intended for you as a developer to be able to have these exist in your feed of events, but not take up space and promoting, an update in a big way that would seem unexpected to players. I'll compare that with a general update, which is probably an update that you might do once a month or once every couple of months or every couple of weeks, whatever your regular update cadence is, where you're actually adding new content, changing levels, adding levels, things like that. These show up in all of the places that I've mentioned earlier in the talk. So this is a good format for kind of all of your basic and regular updates. And then there's kind of this tier for major update. And these show up a little bit bigger. They are presented in a little bit bigger way in a couple of places. And also just a visual cue to players that this is a big deal, that there's something bigger, more substantial happening here. So these would usually be used for things like once a quarter or every half a year, something like that. Your biggest, meatiest updates when you're adding entire new game modes or new levels or a lot of new sizable content that is really one of the maybe 5 biggest updates to your game. So I'll go into some details on that. These work together with some things that we'll be covering in other talks. There's artwork override that you can use. There's discount visibility. There's wishlist notifications, update visibility rounds. You can update the hero art in the library. There's a bunch of things that you can do together to really make your major updates feel pervasive across Steam, especially for customers that own your game. So their experience of your game throughout Steam is really enhanced and reflects that major update. And for new players, they get to see your new branding, your new reflection of what that update is. So I'll go into a couple of examples of how this shows up in Steam and some things that you can take advantage of along that way. This is the top right corner of a game store page. So for Killing Floor 2, they have entirely replaced their branding and their artwork for their Grim Treatments major update. So this artwork then, whenever it shows up throughout the store, has their branding reflecting their major content update. They've also combined that with the discount. So then their game is on sale. And then we'll be sending out wishlist notifications to all the players that have their game on their wish list. And so that, combined with the custom artwork and the wishlist notifications, means that players will be getting an email that says, hey, Killing Floor 2 is on sale, and you can see in the capsule that there's new artwork, there's a new thing happening in it. So that all kind of builds and combines to help players understand that now is a really great time to jump in and get and play this game because there's really cool stuff happening in it, and it's likely that a lot of other players are also jumping in and taking advantage of the new content as well. I mentioned update visibility rounds. So again, you can also use that in conjunction with these major updates, and that allows your game to, again, show on the homepage to people that own your game and have it on their wish list. Yet another place they will be exposed to your game and reminded that now is a good time to jump back into the game and check it out or buy it if they haven't yet. And then you can also update your big hero art at the top of your library page, also to reflect that new branding and the new feeling or environment or whatever in the game. So again, Killing Floor 2 has done that so that when you come to their game page in your library and you're about to hit the play button, you're reminded, oh, there's new content in this game. The experience might be a little bit different this time. Awesome. And of course, if you scroll down the page, you can see more about what this most recent update is because it would be the most recent thing in that activity feed. This is jumping now to another example. A lot of games release DLC or have kind of a new season of content that they add to the game after release. So we have an event type that is designed for communicating that to players. Shows up everywhere as well. This is useful to show to both, existing customers of your game as well as potential customers that might be interested in some new piece of content added for the game that might give them the reason to buy the game now instead of waiting. Also supports in-game items or DLC sales. So if you have additional content for players that they might be interested in, again, these show up in the library details. So when players are on their way to go play your game, they can see that you're having a cool sale on this content in the game. And then these have start and end dates. So we make sure that when the sale is done and over, we don't need to keep showing that event when people can no longer take advantage of that discount. We have an event type for news or announcements, whatever you want to call it. It's really about a kind of a one-way communication from you as a developer to your audience about whatever. This can be devlog, it can be pre-announcing something, it can be telling your fans that you got a new studio dog, whatever you want to talk about that you think would be interesting to your players and your audience. Again, this shows up everywhere in all the spots that I talked about earlier. This is really, your communication channel with your audience. And then finally, the last example that I'm going to go into is cross-promotion. So there are times when you want to be able to talk about the next game that your studio is releasing, or you want to talk about a different platform, like you're rolling out the Xbox version of your game. Cross-promotion is the right category to use for that. It does show up in fewer places, but it shows up in the places where players are more likely to expect that content rather than being surprised by this kind of communication in their library, when really what they expect in their library is communication about things that they already own and that is in their library. So what's it like to create an event? Let's take a look through the tools and kind of what options you have there and how to get the most out of those. The first thing that you'll notice is a new dashboard that shows the listing of all your events that you have posted, as well as drafts that you're working on and events that are staged to go live in the future. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. On this dashboard at the top, we have impressions and stats roll up. So this shows you for all of your events, how many times are players seeing them in the various locations. So on your store page, the library homepage, library detail page, how many times are they seeing those events, and then how many times are they clicking on them to open them up and read them. We also break this down per event. So when you click and view an event detail page, you as an admin will get to see a section of stats in the right-hand column showing for that particular event where it showed up and how many people clicked through. So this way you can kind of keep track of which kinds of events are resonating well with your audience, which ones are people actually clicking on and reading. And so over time you can kind of get a sense of what's working, what's not working, where should you spend your time in the future. So when you go to create a new event, I walked through earlier some of the examples of the types of events. So the first step in creating a new event is selecting the type. And the type, both indicates to customers what kind of event it is, helps set the context. It also can help Steam make sure it shows in the right places. So it's showing up where customers expect to see it. It also can depend on some of the format. So some events have different formats than others. And some have additional fields, like events that are limited time events have both a start and end date, whereas things like announcements and news just have a start date, just a posted date. Once you've selected a category and you're in the process of creating your event, it's got basically the things that you would expect from an editor, your title, your subtitle, then the description of the event. You can include things like animated GIFs, YouTube videos. If you also are posting your events on your own website, you can easily use our HTML importer to just import that and automatically convert it to the formatting that the Steam events support. And there's a bunch of other rich formatting options that you can take advantage of here as well. There's robust localization for each one, so you can easily switch between languages, preview those languages. There's also localization CSV import and export. So if you're working with an outside agency to help do localization, or you have an in-house team that is localizing it, you can easily author your event in English, export that to a CSV, send that off for localization. When it's done, slurp it all back in so you don't have to do a lot of copying and pasting. Then kind of walking our way across the different options here, visibility options. So again, this will depend on the type of event that you've created. Some have end dates and some don't have end dates. One of the most powerful new features that we've added here is the ability to stage events to go live at a particular time in the future. So especially if most of your audience is in a different time zone than you are, you can stage your events and they will automatically go live at whatever time you've set them to go live. The other thing you can do is you can have them become visible now with a start date for the event in the future. So this will be useful as we start to expose more upcoming events in more places, which we plan to do in the future. That will help players see what's coming up, let them sign up for notifications to get reminded when the event actually starts. So that can be really good for helping organize and manage and collect your audience to jump in and pile in your game at a particular time, or watch a live stream that's only going to be happening for 2 hours, things like that. So I'll talk a little bit more about those notifications towards the end of this talk. The third tab is about artwork. Most events require a cover image, and this is kind of the square image near the top here. And I'm going to go into some detail shortly, so I'll just do a quick overview here. There's 3 main pieces of art, and only the cover image is required, except for patch notes. Since patch notes don't show up in places where it's expecting artwork, you can just author your patch notes in a much lighter weight way. Other events, we expect a cover image so that we can present these meaningfully to customers and they can understand what they're seeing. So let's look at kind of what are these 3 different types of images. There's the cover image. This is kind of more of a square image. It's used in kind of square presentations. There's a header image. This is the thing that appears at the top of your event, sets kind of the tone, the visual style for your event. These are optional. And then there's a spotlight image. And this I talked about earlier, showing up in the Steam library detail page. This is basically a banner that you can use to promote kind of your biggest events or the things that you really want to make sure that your audience is reading and paying attention to. So some good examples of cover images really runs the whole gamut, but you can see kind of generally the ones that are working really well have some kind of branding. You don't need to include your game branding. All of the places that these show up are either in the context of your game already, like on your library detail page or on your store page, or if they show up in places like the library homepage where it's alongside other games, we make sure to include the game name alongside it as well, so players can tell what this event is referring to, what game it is for. But you can see from this selection here that a number of developers do decide to include their game branding in these images as well. And depending on the kind of event that you have and how big it is, you may have branding for your event itself, or you may not. You may just have a cool screenshot, or you may start with a screenshot and put some text over it. It's really up to you, but you do want to think about what is this going to communicate about your event. It's nice for kind of setting the tone and helping players really understand what is exciting. Do I want to click on this and learn more about this event? Your header images, as you can see from this selection, a lot of them are pretty kind of ambient. They sit at the top of your event. They mostly are a way of adding kind of an artistic flavor and some color, and they are also used to color the background of your event detailed pages, so they add a little bit of flavor and color and personality to your events, so they're not just walls of gray. Again, here you can see some developers choose to include some text or branding for their events, and again, that's going to kind of depend on how big your event is and whether your event itself is branded or not. For major updates, a lot of times developers will choose to brand those, and so they will include that in their header images as well. All right, library spotlights. You can see here on the left-hand side in context, again, this is on your library detail page, a big banner that you as a developer can provide to kind of show off and highlight a major update or content you want to make sure that players are aware of. You can see from the 4 examples on the right, the one at the top here automatically has the text and the short description overlaid on top of it. The other ones, they have various amounts of branding on their own. The one at the bottom is really the game branding and just a cool image that goes along with it. They also have the title printed right above them in the game detail page, so players can still kind of see what the update is about and decide whether they want to click on it. Personally, I find the ones that are most interesting that actually have the branding and some kind of call to action in the banner itself, but you'll want to kind of iterate, experiment with these as you try out different versions. And then finally, the last step is publishing. On this final publish step, we also give you a recap of where your event is going to show up. So there's a list here on the right-hand side that shows where all the locations that this type of event is going to show up, and then you can publish it. It will also remind you, whether you're setting it live right away or whether you're staging it to go live in the future, just to make sure you understand when it's going to start showing up to players. Hey, thanks for watching. We hope you can jump in and check out the new event tools right away. We'll see you next time.